The movie starts in a city called Stoker-on-Sea, where we see the monster Reborn and his coach Jimbo, who won the World Monster Wrestling Championship 9 times. However, they drowned in the sea on their way to a match, and the city of Stoker no longer had a monster to fight in its name. Seiji, Jimbo's student, managed to bring a new monster to the city named Tinkler, or the Tentacular. The stadium is reopened, and people gather from all over to watch the match. We see a girl named Winnie very excited, and we learn from her conversation with the restaurant owner that she is a resident of Stoker. She goes to touch the statue of Jimbo Coyle, whom we know as her father. After that, Winnie enters the stadium and feels joy and excitement with the fans. We know that the match will be between Tinkler and King George, the title holder. We see the commentators, one a monster and the other a regular human, remembering the 9 years since the death of Reborn and Jimbo, and that no match has been played in the stadium since then. The fans start chanting the names of Reborn and Jimbo, and Winnie feels extremely happy. Tinkler prepares for the match, enters the stadium, and celebrates with the fans who greet and welcome him. We learn that Tinkler has won all the matches he has played, and if he wins today, he will get the championship belt. Tinkler enters the ring and shows off his muscles to the audience. King George, the championship belt holder, who represents England, arrives. King George enters the ring and stands facing Tinkler. Both prepare for the match. We see Winnie's mother sitting next to her, feeling nervous and afraid that Tinkler might lose. The match starts between King George and Tinkler, who cannot withstand King George's blows as he attacks and hits him. By chance, Winnie notices that King George licks his nose before every attack he makes. She tells her mother and quickly runs through the crowd to reach the ring. Once the first round ends, we see that Tinkler is nervous and scared, and Seiji tries to calm him down. They don't know how they will win, but Winnie arrives and explains to Seiji that King George licks his nose before every attack, and if they take advantage of this point, they will be able to win the match. Tinkler feels inspired and thanks Winnie. The second round begins, and Tinkler manages to dodge King George's attacks. As soon as he sees him lick his nose, he moves away from him, grabs his tentacles, lifts him up, and throws him. He hits King George in the next blow, and he cannot get up again. After the countdown ends, Tinkler wins the match, and the audience continues to cheer for him. Tinkler gets the championship belt and feels happy, thanking the people of Stoker because he would not have reached this achievement without them. But suddenly, Tinkler tells them that he will not be able to continue with them in Stoker, despite his love for them. The people of the city are shocked to hear this, and the announcer asks Tinkler for the reason. Tinkler explains that he is making his own history and cannot do that in Stoker because the city already has a great history. He announces to the audience that he will move to Slater Bowl and play in its name. Jamesy, Tinkler's new sponsor, arrives and is happy that Tinkler agreed to play in the name of Slater Bowl. Seiji goes to apologize to Winnie and tells her that he must stay with Tinkler. Tinkler leaves and breaks a picture of Reborn as he leaves the place, which makes Winnie sad and shocked. The next day, the townspeople gather at the restaurant, and Winnie's mother tries to calm her daughter down. The mayor arrives looking stressed and tells the attendees that the situation is worse than they imagine. He asks his assistant to explain the current situation. The assistant explains that the stadium costs a lot of money, and if there are no monsters, there will be no matches, no fans, and therefore no money, and the city will go bankrupt. The same thing that happened to the town of Pitmore will happen to them, where they have nothing left but an illegal fighting ring. Everyone is shocked by this news, but the mayor calms them down and tells them that James, the sponsor of Slater Bowl, offered to buy the stadium for a large sum of money. The problem is that he will demolish the stadium and turn it into a parking lot. Everyone is shocked to hear this, and Winnie feels upset and tells them that they cannot demolish the stadium because the city without monster wrestling will be worthless. The mayor explains that if they don't sell the stadium, the entire city will go bankrupt. He tells them that there is a loan on the stadium due in 90 days, and they certainly won't be able to get a new monster to play in the city's name in such a short time. Everyone feels frustrated and leaves. Winnie enters the stadium and looks at the pictures of Reborn and Jimbo hanging everywhere. She remembers a memory of her with her father, telling Reborn that his genes are in these notes and in his mind. She continues to remember Reborn's matches, who was able to defeat all the monsters he faced. Suddenly, an idea comes to her mind. She quickly returns home and takes out her father's training notes. She tells her mother that she will travel to Pitmore to get a monster to play in the name of Stoker. Her mother is surprised and tells her that this is not her responsibility, but Winnie reminds her that she is the daughter of the greatest monster trainer in the world and must save his legacy no matter what. Winnie leaves and takes the train. After a while, Winnie arrives in Pitmore, which looks terrifying and scary. She reaches the illegal fighting hall and enters it. She approaches the ring and sees two monsters fighting. A lizard monster hits the other monster, then jumps, grabs its tail, wraps it very quickly, and throws it out of the hall. Winnie and all the attendees are amazed by what happened. Winnie goes and asks the lizard monster to play in the name of Stoker and participate in official matches, and she will be his coach. The lizard monster mocks Winnie and laughs at her. Whenever Winnie meets a new monster, she repeats the same words to him, and the monsters mock her as well. While Winnie is drinking juice, a man comes and consoles her. He tells her that he bet all his money on the orange monster. He explains to her that this monster's name is Steve, and he has not won any match before, and if he wins today, he will get all the bet money. Winnie is surprised when she sees Steve doing a certain move, and she remembers when he was little and playing with her. She realizes that he is Reborn's son. We return to the match with Steve, who asks his opponent to come closer so he can reach him. Suddenly, Winnie calls out to Steve and says to him, "Hey, Ray." Steve is surprised and remembers the things he is supposed to do. Steve grabs his opponent and pretends to hit him. We know that they are in agreement with each other. The referee comes and reminds Steve that he must lose as they agreed, otherwise the leader will punish him. Steve is scared and goes back to complete the match. He tells the pig the moves they will do. When the pig is about to attack him, Winnie comes and distracts Steve, who dodges the pig's attack unintentionally. Winnie continues to tell Steve that he is Reborn's son and asks him to talk to her, but Steve ignores her. When he tries to push her, he hits the pig, falls to the ground, and loses consciousness. Steve tries to wake the pig up before the countdown ends, but the pig does not wake up, and Steve wins the match. Everyone present loses their money except for one person. Suddenly, Steve is surprised when a big door opens and a small monster falls to the ground. Their leader comes out, looking terrifying and huge. She flaps her small wings, flies, and manages to enter the ring. She approaches Steve and tells him that she lost a lot of money because he did not lose the match as they agreed. Steve apologizes to her and says that it happened against his will and that he always loses. The leader presses her nails on him, scares him, and threatens to kill him if he doesn't return all the money she lost because of him. She gives him a deadline and leaves. Afterward, Winnie goes to Steve and tells him that she can help him collect the money he needs. She tells him that she is Winnie, the daughter of Jimbo, his father's coach. Steve tells her that he doesn't know what she means and tries to ignore her, but Winnie continues to pressure him until he gets angry and tells her that he is indeed Ray, the son of Reborn. Winnie is happy to hear this and tells him that she will use her father's notes in his training so that he can win matches and get the Stoker Stadium back. Steve mocks her until the leader asks him to go and get her the money and takes the pig to punish him. Then Ray, Steve, leaves the place and decides to help Winnie. He asks her not to tell anyone that his name is Ray or that he is Reborn's son. The next morning, we see Winnie sleeping on Steve's head, who wakes her up because they have arrived in Stoker. They enter the training area inside the stadium, and Steve is surprised that the place has not changed since he left it. He goes to see the ring and remembers memories of him as a child with his father, who asked him to stop dancing and start training for fighting. We return to the present with Steve and Winnie, who apologizes to him because she is the reason for what happened to him. She tells him that they must win the matches, otherwise the stadium will be demolished and turned into a parking lot. Steve tells her that he loves wrestling and definitely loves his father, but he doesn't want to be a copy of him. He thinks he's only helping her for the money. Winnie gets angry and tells him that she will start training him from tomorrow morning and leaves. The next day, Winnie wakes up early, gets surprised, and changes her clothes. Her mother comes and encourages her and gives her the key to her father's vehicle. Winnie thanks her and leaves. She flies the vehicle, controls it with difficulty, and circles the stadium. Then she goes to wake Steve up, who is surprised and tells her that she is very annoying. He tells her that he doesn't like training and asks her to bring him a match, and he will take care of the rest. Winnie agrees to that. At night, we see that Winnie has already brought a match for Steve with a monster named Jackson. Jackson looks like a very strong monster and shows off his skills as he destroys the car. We see Winnie encouraging Steve and reading her father's notes, telling him the moves that will help him in the match, but Steve ignores her and leaves. The match begins, and Jackson attacks Steve, who pretends to be injured and falls to the ground. Jackson gets tired because Steve is acting. Steve jumps high and attacks him, but Steve moves away at the last moment. The first round ends, and Winnie explains to Steve that this is a real match, and they won't get the money unless they win. Steve is shocked when he hears this and asks her how he can defeat Jackson. Winnie asks him to make Jackson run after him until he gets tired, and then he will be able to beat him. The second round begins, and Jackson attacks Steve, who pretends to be exhausted and continues to run in the ring to force him to get tired. Before Jackson reaches him, Steve grabs a crane that throws him away. Jackson goes after him and throws him, gets tired, and crashes into the containers to knock him down. But Steve grabs a hook, moves with it, crashes, and falls into the ring again. Jackson also enters the ring, unable to move from exhaustion. Steve, who is also tired, fights, and they both fall, but Steve manages to pin Jackson and the countdown ends, and Steve wins the match. Winnie goes to him and encourages him because he won, so Steve is very happy because he won a match for the first time in his life. We see the commentators mocking the match between Jackson and Steve and describing it as the worst match of the week. They also talk about Tinkler, who has adapted to Slider Bowl and has been able to defeat all the monsters he fought. We return to Winnie, who is angry that their match was the worst of the week. She She tells Steve that he must train. Winnie actually starts training Steve, who we discover is very weak and cannot do many exercises and cannot even play under pressure. However, Winnie continues to train him in the hope that he will improve, but unfortunately, this does not happen. Winnie feels upset and doesn't know what to do. Steve apologizes to her and tells her that he left town because he was weak and people wanted him to be like his father. Winnie sits next to him and tells him that it's possible that her father's training method doesn't suit him and suggests that she train him in a new way. She asks him about the things that make him happy. So Steve tells her that he loves to sleep and can sleep a lot and that he loves to eat too. But Winnie knows he loves to dance. As soon as she plays a song, Steve starts dancing happily and joyfully. Winnie is amazed when she finds that Steve dances very well and says to herself that 80% of wrestling depends on footwork. Steve continues to dance and tells her that he has learned all kinds of dances from different countries. Then, an idea comes to Winnie's mind. She brings steps in the shape of feet and asks Steve to dance on these steps. She also moves on the drawings on the ground in a certain way and asks Steve to do the same. Steve does everything she asks of him while dancing and starts training for fighting. After that, he participates in a match with a monster who attacks and hits him very quickly. As usual, Steve can't fight back. Then Winnie tells him to execute the tango plan. Steve dances and wins the match, and Winnie shows him off and hits him and wins the match. Days pass, and Steve and Winnie continue their dance training. We see that Steve is very happy with what he's doing. He participates in a second match with two monsters at the same time, dances while fighting, and manages to defeat them as well. We see that Winnie has started to learn wrestling better so that she can train Steve more effectively. When Steve is on the treadmill, Winnie comes and tells him that there is a new match. But the problem is that the match is with a huge and strong monster, and to defeat this monster, they must flip him on his back. She shows him that she brought him the lizard monster to train with. The lizard monster attacks Steve, who tries to lift him, but fails every time. In the end, he manages to carry him. The time for the match comes, and the huge, strong monster enters the ring. We see that Steve is unable to even move him from his place. The monster hits him, throws him into the corner of the ring, grabs him, and throws him on the ropes. Then Winnie asks Steve to execute the plan. When the monster pounces on him, Steve carries him, lifts him up, and throws him out of the ring. The monster cannot get up from his place, and Steve wins the match. Winnie is happy and takes the prize, which is a large sum of money. We see the commentators annoyed that Steve is dancing and not fighting, but despite that, he has won 3 matches in a row. Winnie thanks Steve and tells him that Steve is ready to fight any monster in Stoker Stadium. All the people of the city are happy when they hear this. We see Tinkler training and getting tired when he watches the news and knows that Stoker Stadium will work again. We return to Winnie and Steve, who feel excited. Suddenly, Winnie receives a phone call and learns that King George wants to wrestle Steve at Stoker Stadium. Winnie agrees and feels overjoyed. We see King George's coach telling him that he brought him a match that is impossible to lose, but King George is scared and doesn't want to wrestle again. We move to Winnie and Steve, who are dancing as they walk through the city. Once they enter the stadium, they find that there are workers emptying the place. The mayor's assistant apologizes to Winnie for what is happening and tells her that Jamesy will pay more money if they sell him the stadium today. Winnie learns that the mayor went to sign the contract at Liverpool Stadium. We go to Liverpool Stadium, where we see the mayor going to Jamesy to sign the contract. Steve and Winnie arrive and ask the mayor to wait. Winnie tells James that Stoker has a new monster and tells him that King George will fight Steve in their stadium. Tinkler laughs at her and tells her that King George has retired. He asks James to sign the contract. Winnie realizes that he is the one who wants to demolish the stadium because no matter how much he wins, he loses. Tinkler tells her that dancing is not like wrestling and throws him on the stands, which are shattered. Winnie begs Tinkler not to do that because the stadium is everything to Stoker, but Tinkler tells her that it's none of her business and makes James sign the contract. Everyone leaves the place and Winnie feels sad and cries. She goes to sit on the roof of a building. Steve comes and sits next to her and consoles her. Winnie tells him that he now has the money he needs and can pay off his debts. She feels sad because she ruined her family name and combined wrestling with dancing. Winnie leaves. After that, Steve returns to Pitmore and gives the money to the leader's assistant. He enters the betting hall and the leader comes and tells him that there are a lot of people betting on his victory today and asks him to lose so that she can win the bets and leave. When Steve opens the leader's locker, he sees a picture of him with his father reborn and decides not to give up. We move to Winnie, who is at home and sees the workers putting dynamite around the stadium. Suddenly, Winnie is surprised when she finds Steve looking at her from the window. She goes out to him and asks him what he's doing here. Steve tells her that they must prevent the destruction of the stadium no matter what, and tells her that she changed his life for the better, and that without her, he would not have been able to do anything. Winnie hugs him. We see Tinkler next to Stoker Stadium with James, who tells people that he will demolish the stadium and turn it into a parking lot. All the people of the city feel upset, but Tinkler ignores them and presses the detonator, but nothing explodes. Suddenly, Steve and Winnie appear and tell them that they cut the wires connected to the dynamite. Steve starts provoking Tinkler and tells him that he will challenge Stoker. Tinkler mocks him and asks him why he would challenge a loser like him. Then Steve tells everyone that his name is Ray Reborn, the son of the greatest monster wrestler in history. Everyone is surprised when they hear this news, and Tinkler is shocked and angry. Winnie takes the opportunity and provokes him further until he agrees to fight Steve. She tells him that they will play a 3-round match, and if Steve does not defeat or surrender, they will respect the stadium. Tinkler gets very angry and agrees to fight Steve. Ray. He tells her that if he defeats him, he will destroy the stadium completely. Then everyone encourages Steve. Tinkler starts and hits Jimbo's statue and throws it far away, and it falls on top of the mountain. The news spreads everywhere, and the whole world knows that Steve is Reborn's son. We return to Winnie, who tells Steve that all the people of the city gathered and made him a training ground so that he can complete 3 rounds against Tinkler. She explains to him that he must pass the obstacle course and reach his father's statue. Steve is shocked, yet he starts training, but he faces many difficulties and traps everywhere and gets beaten. However, he continues his training until he is able to pass the test. Many days pass, and Steve trains more and fulfills everything Winnie asks of him. After many attempts, he manages to pass all the barriers and get out of the test. He jumps and runs very fast and manages to reach Jimbo's statue. Winnie comes and encourages him and tells him that he is ready now. The time for the match comes, and the audience gathers from all over the world. We see the commentators who expect Steve to lose from the first round. Steve enters the stadium, dancing skillfully, and climbs into the ring in a very strange way. We see that there are a large number of audience cheering for him. We move to Winnie, whose mother comes and tells her that whatever the result, her father will be proud of her. Tinkler enters the stadium with the championship belt and tells the people of the city that they will not see this belt again. As soon as he sees his father's picture, Steve feels nervous and scared and tells Winnie that he is terrified. But Winnie encourages him, hugs him, and tells him that he will definitely be able to complete the 3 rounds and that their history will start from here. Steve feels very excited and thanks her. As soon as the match starts, Tinkler hits Steve with a single blow that knocks him to the ground. But Steve stands up again and starts dancing, dodging Tinkler's attacks as he tries to hit him. Then the commentators realize that Steve will continue to dodge Tinkler's attacks by dancing until the round time ends and Tinkler gets tired. Tinkler climbs the rope and jumps, but Steve moves away from him quickly. Tinkler grabs him, throws him to the corner, and jumps on him again, but Steve escapes from him. The fight continues in this way until the first round ends, and Steve and Winnie are very happy. Seiji goes to Tinkler and asks him to perform the moves they were training on. The second round begins, and Tinkler dances with Steve and grabs him, and Steve cannot escape from him. Tinkler takes the opportunity, throws him to the ground, jumps on him and hits him, then throws him to the corner, grabs him by his hands, lifts him up, spins him in the air, throws him to the ground again, and continues to hit him. Unfortunately, Steve cannot dodge Tinkler's powerful consecutive attacks. Tinkler grabs Steve's neck and lifts him up to hit him with a knockout blow. But before he does, the second round ends. Then Tinkler tells Steve that he will kill him if he doesn't surrender in the third round and throws him to the ground. Seiji goes to Winnie and tells her that Tinkler will not stop until he kills Steve and asks her to surrender and leave. And because Winnie is afraid for Steve, she suggests that they surrender, but Steve stops her. Steve looks at his father's pictures, endures, and asks Winnie to try another way of fighting, which is to try to win and not dodge the blows. Winnie also agrees and raises the surrender sign. She asks Steve to combine dancing with fighting and tells him the moves he will do. Tinkler gets tired because Steve will continue the match. The third round begins, and Steve hits Tinkler and dodges his attacks. So Tinkler loses his temper and tries to hit him, but Steve dodges him and hits him. The fight continues in this way, a blow from Tinkler and a blow from Steve, and everyone is impressed. Tinkler grabs Steve, jumps with him, hits him, throws him to the corner, and attacks him. Steve grabs Tinkler's tentacles, wraps them, sticks him in the corner, and hits him with a very strong blow. Steve climbs over the ropes and jumps to hit him, but they collide with each other in a strong collision that knocks them to the ground. Although Tinkler is affected by the blow, he manages to stand up again, and the referee starts the countdown. Winnie continues to call Steve, who is completely unconscious and does not move. At this moment, Winnie's mother starts clapping, and everyone imitates her. When Steve hears this sound, he wakes up again, and the audience is surprised and excited. Unlike Tinkler, who completely loses his temper. He pounces on Steve, who dodges him, grabs his tentacles, wraps them quickly, and throws him on the rope. They fly up, and Steve takes advantage of the ropes, jumps in the air, hits Tinkler with a knockout blow, falls to the ground, and sits on top of him. When Tinkler tries to get up, he can't move, and the countdown ends, and the match ends. dances, and Steve wins. The audience celebrates with Steve, who celebrates with them. Tinkler leaves the ring crying. We see the leader and the monsters with her, who are proud of Steve's victory. After that, Steve takes the championship belt and celebrates with all the audience who cheer for him and Winnie. Seiji comes to Winnie and congratulates her on the victory, tells her that she is an excellent coach, and leaves. Winnie and Steve celebrate while dancing, and the audience joins them, and they all dance together.